Welcome to our June 30 minutes of excellence. Glad to have you all here. I just want to do a quick introduction of myself before I turn it over to our presenter. My name is Kim Meadows, and I am with the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. I serve as the training director. In case this is your first 30 minutes of excellence session, just want to let you know that we do offer these 30 minutes of excellence sessions every month, and we just bring in different workshop presenters, different subject matter experts, just on a variety of workshop of different topics, different workforce development topics. We are excited to have Katie Brown here today. Katie is the founder of Engine. Katie is going to introduce herself and give you a little bit more about her background. And her presentation day is called Everybody Wins. So, Katie, at this point, I'll turn it over to you and let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Kim. And I have to say, you're welcome. And you're reading through the shout outs to everyone in the chat as they're introducing themselves is the best I've seen from all the webinars I've done. So great job. My name is Katie. I'm the founder and chief education officer of an organization called Engine. We are a B Corp, and our mission is to remove English as a barrier for immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages. I've been doing this work for almost 30 years. My PhD is in second language acquisition, and I have spent my entire career working to develop language upskilling programs that can reach communities at scale with measurable outcomes. And so I'm here today to talk about my favorite thing, which is how we can use an ecosystem approach to uplift the multilingual workforce and help get speakers of other languages into jobs with the potential for economic mobility, addressing issues that are in tiny communities as well as large urban centers, and really try to help include more voices at the table. Some stats to get us started. By 2030, which is in like just 5.5 years, 97% of net workforce growth in the US will be immigrants and their children. New data suggest that newcomers, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants, can add $124 billion to the US economy over the next 15 years through payroll, income, and taxes. We know that successful immigrant and refugee hiring and workforce inclusion initiatives require training and support, that English skills are the #1 barrier to inclusion and access, and that a collaborative, ecosystem-based approach to developing integrated English skills and workforce skills is a win for the multilingual workforce, for employers, and for the US economy writ large. I also wanted to say upfront that I'm happy to answer questions during the session. You can put them in the chat. You can put them in the question. I don't think we have a question section. Just put them in the chat. And if I see a question pop up, I'll answer it while I'm talking. So I want to talk a little bit about why recruiting and investing in multilingual talent is so important. First, we need workers who speak multiple languages. Multilingualism is a superpower. We have millions of speakers of other languages all across the country who need customer service, who need healthcare, who need to buy services. By including the multilingual workforce in our workforce development initiatives, in our workplaces, we are able to deliver care and customer service and other services in multiple languages. So an inclusive workplace begins with accessible recruiting and onboarding practices. What this means is that we have to reach the multilingual workforce in a way that is accessible and understandable to them. And I have seen job fairs being conducted in multiple languages. I have seen flyers and recruiting materials made in multiple languages. I've seen employers who bring interpreters to job sites for hiring. But we need to go beyond just making it accessible. We need to make it inclusive, which means a workplace-based English upskilling program. In this way, you can help new hires and incumbent workers with English skills, with digital literacy skills integrated in what they need for the workplace so that they can be moved into additional positions within the same organization. If we do this simultaneous investment in accessible outreach and English upskilling, the multilingual workforce rapidly becomes eligible for promotion, for further training. It helps employers recruit from within. It helps employers retain their talent. And it opens up entry-level positions for more job seekers. So when I talk about a win-win-win, addressing the multilingual workforce and including them creates opportunity, and it also continues to create opportunity. And it lets us have the language skills we need in the workforce. This is a graphic that I like that sort of illustrates what I just talked about. We have immigrants, we have refugees, we have speakers of other languages across the country. If we can reach out to them, get them into entry-level roles, give them ongoing coaching and support with English and workforce skills integrated, then we can help them get access to family-sustaining wages. Not sure how many people on the call know this, but there are 2 million immigrants in the United States right now who are unemployed or underemployed, often because English is a barrier to using the skills and credentials they come with from other countries. And we need to make sure that we find them in our community-based workforce development initiatives. The other big thing to know is that traditional approaches to English as a second language generally don't meet the needs of working adults. They often rely on outdated and ineffective curricula. There are significant barriers to participation in these traditional programs, things like, I already have a job. How can I go take an ESL class that meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 12 to 1:15? And most importantly, there's a shortage of providers. As a country, we meet the needs of 4% of our adult English learners, which means that we are not reaching the people who need English skills in order to participate fully in the workforce. And so what we know is that innovative workforce-focused English programs are the solution. So why do they work best? Well, I could spend a different 30 minutes of excellence talking to you about how language learning works, why a task-based approach to language instruction works, why context matters for adult learning. But what I'll tell you is that workplace-focused language programs are amazing because training is tied to real workplace needs, which means that learners can use the English lessons that they're getting right away. They can use them, as you can see in the images here, when they're offering care to a patient or when they're taking someone's order in a restaurant. But they can use them when they are communicating on the job in a manufacturing context or a distribution context, in a customer service context. Because they're able to use the language skills that they're getting right away, they get better. Language is a skill, and as adults, we learn by doing. And so when adult learners are getting language instruction tied to their real-world needs, they'll be able to use the language faster, which means they'll be able to do their jobs better and more safely and participate in the workplace community and just learn faster. So we know for a fact that these are the most successful programs. Context and relevance are the keys to being successful. So I said before that we generally don't meet the needs of most English learners, and often when we do, what we're offering them doesn't make sense. The first question to ask is, who is learning English? Are we teaching English to foreign trained engineers who are working to pass OSHA safety training in the United States? Are we working with home healthcare workers? Are we working with foreign trained doctors? Like, we need to understand who we're reaching, why they need to learn English, what they need to do with English, whether or not they're going to need to read or write or listen or speak, what tasks they need to be able to complete, and can we find real examples of the language that they're going to use? Because if we can do that, then we can make sure we're giving them workforce skills integrated with English skills, which is what makes this work. So this is an example of an industry-specific course. It's English for people who want to get into careers in cybersecurity. It's being used across the country with newcomers who are looking to get the skills they need for cross-training in cybersecurity careers. So we take materials, things like, what can cybersecurity learn from behavioral science? We turn them into adaptive lessons so that English learners get the career-focused English they need to participate in a cybersecurity credential or certificate. I wanted to illustrate this for all of you. in context. So you can see that this is coming from a healthit.gov website. We're giving language learners the language skills around things like cyber attacks and health information systems and consequences. We're making sure that they understand the language for this specific career so that they can access cybersecurity certificates that are being offered through workforce development programs in communities. The idea here is combining resources. We have millions of newcomers. We have tens of thousands of job openings in cybersecurity. We have cybersecurity training programs that are often funded through state and local government grants, through workforce development initiatives. We need to expand the pool of participants by making sure that they get access to the language skills they need to participate in these credential programs. What we're talking about doing here is leveraging technology to do what computers do best, so people can do what humans do best. So what technology can do best is reach more learners and workers, remove barriers to access, focus and individualize instruction, measure progress and outcomes for rapid and efficient training transitions. This is a super important piece of this puzzle because when we're talking about working adult learners, we want to help them as efficiently as possible, and we want to move them into career pathways as efficiently as possible. So what we're trying to do here is optimize learning for competency-based models at scale. It's important to know too that all of this work I'm talking about using technology so that we can reach learners, give them super specific language lessons, make sure they're getting the language they need for in-demand careers either here or in-demand careers in other parts of the country, here being used to describe wherever you all are, which is all over the place. We're also integrating digital skills. So everything that we're talking about doing is integrating digital skills and workforce skills. Part of what I said I was going to talk about today are models that work. So I want to use some real data from our organization serving English learners across the country. Over the last year, we've served about 15,000 English learners who accessed English upskilling either through their workplaces or their enrollment in adult education or workforce development programs. And I have data here based on responses from almost 2,500 of those learners. They're coming from dozens of countries, speaking more than 24 languages. About 60% were actually in employer-based programs where they were hired and then offered the opportunity to get workforce-focused English skills as a benefit from their employer. About 42% were actually accessing this through community-based organizations, workforce development organizations, community colleges, adult education providers. Often those are job seekers compared to the incumbent workers we're serving through workforce-focused or workplace-focused programs, but both of them are focused on helping the multilingual workforce get relevant English skills. One of the first findings, and I've seen this year over year over year, and I've seen this working with organizations that are both using my platform and organizations using all sorts of other training providers, is that employers that invest in English upskilling see stronger recruitment and retention. This makes sense. The US meets the needs of 4% of our adult English learners, which means we have millions of English learners who are not able to access instruction in any other way. If they're able to access it through an employer benefit, then they're getting English skills, and 83% of them said they were more likely to stay with their company because English is offered as a benefit. 89% that they're likely to refer a friend because English is offered as a benefit. And 80% of them achieved a career or a social goal as a result of English upskilling. English upskilling works, and it helps employers retain talent. Here's a quote from a learner who was a worker at Walmart who was able to be promoted to an assistant manager role. But it's not just that that the employers are able to retain these workers. English instruction powers more engaged and productive workplaces. 87% of the learners we served improved their proficiency, but 93% improved confidence at work and beyond, and 90% saved time at work. We know that multilingualism is a superpower, But we also know that most workplaces in the United States, business is conducted in English. You can hire workers who have emerging English skills, but if you don't invest in making sure that they can contribute and collaborate and communicate in the workplace, you're going to lose out on efficiency, on productivity, and more importantly, on worker inclusion. And I got thousands of examples of people, of learners giving feedback like this. I used to have no self-confidence in communicating with my colleagues and would only greet them and avoid talking to them. But now I can establish much better communication. And this is a learner who's employed at Amazon. I said I was going to talk about models that work. And one of the models that I've seen work is where there are workforce dollars. For example, the state of Colorado's Office of New Americans invested in a statewide program to help language learners, either incumbent workers, job seekers, any new Coloradoan, get access to workforce-focused English skills. Those workers are able to get English skills and then apply for jobs at places like Amazon, where there is an English benefit. So combining these resources, workforce development dollars for helping people get the English they need for an entry-level role, and then access to employers that are offering the kind of on-the-job training that's going to continue to invest in and build multilingual workforce skills, is better for everyone. It helps create access to new talent pools, and it helps those talent pools get included, retained, and promoted from within. I mentioned before that the solution that I'm talking about is using technology to deliver this type of training. We know that technology-enabled solutions are better because they can reach more people, they can reach them rapidly, they can personalize instruction. And in this particular case, English upskilling and digital upskilling go hand in hand. 85% of the learners that we served last year said their digital skills improved as a result of technology-mediated training. And I see this across the board when I talk to workforce development professionals. When you're delivering workforce training using technology, you're not just helping your workers get whatever you're teaching them, you're also helping them get technology skills. So I have an example from a learner here. I liked Engine because I've been learning how to use the computer, which I didn't even know how to turn on before. English upskilling opens pathways to new credentials and careers. So I mentioned before that we're using technology to do this. 89% of the learners that we surveyed improved their job skills in addition to improving their English skills. And these are portable skills. They can take them whether they are job seekers who are getting English upskilling through a public library program, like the programs that we work at with Queens Public Library, New York Public Library, whether they're working with an employer-focused program. We're helping learners get transferable, durable skills that they can bring along with their multilingualism to the employers they have now or other employers. 3 in 4 of the learners that we surveyed agreed that they could navigate life better and were more engaged with their communities and better able to help their families, which is perhaps the most important piece of serving the multilingual workforce. We're talking about workers who have families. We're talking about parents who want to be able to understand what's coming home in their kids' backpacks, who want to be able to go to parent-teacher conferences. We've served employers across the country where not only have we been able to help incumbent workers get the English skills they need for promotion from a dishwasher role to a assistant kitchen manager role to a general manager role, they've also gotten the English skills they need to have parent-teacher conferences and help their kids get back on track when things are going wrong at school. So this is something that benefits not just the employer, not just the worker in the workplace, but also communities and families. And it gives the workforce the skills they need to transfer into other jobs. It helps us take all of the multilingual talent that we have in the United States that isn't always included and make sure we're including it in our economy and in our workplaces. So having seen hundreds of programs across the country, I put together these 5 critical components for what makes an English upskilling program successful. The first is dedicated program champions. Stakeholders need to own the English upskilling model to make sure that multilingual job seekers are supported not just throughout the recruitment process, but that they're also appropriately trained and onboarded and given access to on-the-job training and professional development. And so what this means is thinking about the multilingual workers and job seekers in your community, how to reach them, and who is going to sort of own an end-to-end program to make sure that they're able to access employment opportunities, that those employment opportunities include access to English and workforce training skills that will help them be included in the workplace and be eligible for further promotion and advancement. The first piece of that is strategic recruitment. So participants are not necessarily going to know about recruitment, training, and development efforts that include opportunities for them. Most hiring events are in English. They're advertised in places where English speakers get their information. Making sure that you tap into the multilingual talent in your community is going to mean thinking outside of the typical places for recruitment and reaching out to immigrant serving organizations, refugee resettlement organizations, community groups, to make sure that they know about the fact that you are working to recruit and place speakers of other languages. Cultural awareness is a big piece of a successful program. And what I mean by this, first, is that multilingual workers will often have better participation and engagement when they feel understood and supported by their managers, which means that if you're thinking about an incumbent worker training program or a refugee hiring program, you want to make sure that your managers have been trained in how to manage a multicultural workforce so that they understand the value and benefit of workforce upskilling, because that will help them encourage and support their staff. And I've seen this done a number of different ways. You can have multilingual staff members do training for your managers so they can see what it feels like to get information in a language they don't necessarily understand or speak as a first language. You can have managers take language classes. You can generally just make sure that your managers understand the nuances in the cultures that they're managing. The fourth critical component here are career-aligned milestones. When you're thinking about hiring newcomers and hiring speakers of other languages into entry-level roles, you want to understand what language skills they need to succeed in those roles and what language skills they'll need to move into the next roles, and make sure that you signpost this and make it very clear and transparent, not just for them, but for hiring managers and for everyone else in the workforce. Learning a language is really hard, takes a long time. And as you're making progress, you want to know what you're able to unlock. So when you're thinking through recruiting, supporting, and moving the multilingual workforce through different positions within an organization, it's important to understand what they need in order to get from job to job. I'll make this maybe a little clearer with an example. I spoke before about back of the house kitchen workers who were able to get the English skills they needed to be promoted to assistant manager and manager roles. What makes it work really well in a workplace like that is knowing that, okay, when I'm hiring staff to work as prep cooks and line cooks and dishwashers, they need to understand this level of English. They basically need to understand information that's coming to them. When they move into roles where they're supervising, they need to be able to communicate externally to other stakeholders in the kitchen. And then their level of language needs to get better as they're moving to the front of the house and they're talking to customers. And so mapping those milestones to training in the workplace makes it easier for workers to understand how they're progressing through positions in an organizational chart, and also for them to be encouraged as they're working on their English skills. And then the last critical component that I have here are defined metrics for success. So we talked at the very beginning of this presentation about understanding your audience. Who are the workers that you're upskilling? What country do they come from? What level of English do they have? What level of English do they need? What are your goals for them? Depending upon how you and your organization fit into this, whether you're assisting with incumbent worker training, you're working on job placement, you're working on career training for people who are in career transitions, you're going to be serving a different population of workers and learners with different levels of English proficiency, different levels of formal education, different levels of credentials from their home countries. understand who you're serving and what success looks like for them so that you can measure it. Because the best way to get programs like this funded is to be able to collect the kind of data that I was just showing you about percentage of learners who would recommend their employer to a friend, percentage of learners with improved confidence, percentage of learners who were able to accomplish a workforce-focused goal. I've covered a lot of information in my 26 minutes of excellence, and I wanted to save time for questions. So I'm not sure if there are any, but I would love it if anyone would put questions in the chat. Or Kim, you're back here. If you have a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Absolutely. So I do see, well, first of all, thank you, Katie, for that wonderful 26 minutes of excellence. And we have great time for questions. So if we happen to run over the 30 minutes, feel free if you need to jump off, but we'll just keep going, Katie, until we get the questions answered. So it looks like Jennifer has a question. Jennifer Small has a question. How do you feel about language apps for translation?
I feel great about language apps for translation. I think that translation is a tool that we have in our toolbox when we're working with multilingual workforce. If you can have an app that can help you communicate with your workforce, that's great. But I also think that in addition to translating, in addition to interpreting and language access, we need to think about language upskilling, because no language app is going to replace the fact that people in the workforce are using English, that you need to have a job interview in English, that you need to manage people in English. So we should use, by all means, language learning apps for access, for making sure that we're all communicating with each other and everyone has all the information that they need. And we should focus on getting workers the English skills they need to really thrive in the workplace.
Great. Thank you for that. Christina asked the question, will the recording be shared? So we will share the recording. You will get that before the end of the week. Catherine has a question for you, Kate. It says, what is the best way to build trust with the immigrant refugee community organizations?
So the best way to build trust is to engage with the organizations and try to include members of the immigrant and refugee community to the extent that you can in the work that you're doing, because people tend to trust others with similar lived experience and show them that you will listen to them. So a lot of the time when we're working with historically underrepresented groups, we decide what they need. If you go to the groups and you ask what they need and you listen to them and you try to understand, like, why am I not getting job seekers coming from this recent pool of Afghan newcomers? What could I do? What could our employers do to be more inclusive? So listen is probably the second recommendation there.
Thank you for that. Let's see. Jennifer asked, have you heard of adult education as an on-the-job training component?
Yes. I think there are adult education organizations that will help organize on-the-job training and having on-the-job training as part of a career or short-term credential.
Okay.
And then we have somebody asking questions about, I have a person who speaks English after years, but no high school diploma or GED. Okay, and so a couple of answers came into the chat. One says there are GED programs in other languages and the test is in many languages. Look at local community colleges for programs. Yes, so if you're serving somebody who does not have a high school credential, who needs a high school credential for a job opportunity, the first question to ask is, do they need an actual high school credential or do they need a high school equivalency? And then what's the best way for them to get that equivalency? Because those are all done different ways. They're going to be, what makes the most sense for whoever you're serving is going to depend on their level of formal education, the extent to which they've prepared for one of those high school equivalency exams, whether or not they have some credits they could use for a high school experience. So I'm sorry that the answer is very nuanced, but it really is trying to dig in to understand what that person needs and what is the quickest way to get them what they need. Okay, let's see. This person has never gone to school. How would get them education to get a better job? Yes. So it starts with looking at what jobs require which credentials. I know that the hospitality industry as a whole, it's often easier to get an entry-level role without a high school credential, and there often are opportunities for advancement and promotion that don't require high school credentials. how can a
Okay.
service such as, okay, here's another question, which is, how can a service such as NGen work from a public workforce development system? Is this something that can be offered to interested parties directly through Pennsylvania Career Link, or is it better to be offered directly from a company? That is an excellent question that I definitely don't have time to answer on this call, but I will follow up. Jose, if you send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat, we will follow up with you about the best way to do that, because we do work directly with employers and also with workforce development organizations. Kim, I've lost track of all the questions.
Okay, so yeah, I'll jump back in here.
For overtime.
No, and we can continue going. So again, if you have to jump off, feel free to do so. We will continue to record, and then we'll maybe take a couple more questions, Katie. So this one says, is ASL considered multilingual?
Yes, American Sign Language is a second language.
Okay. And then we have Natalie says, does NGN have or know of other resources such as project charter templates that can bolster the strategic planning and development of programs like this?
Yes, and so I don't have any templates that I can readily share, but what I can tell, and Kim, we will have everyone's contact information so we can send some
Yes,
resources out
yes.
afterwards. Okay, good. So what I can tell you is that there are some really great models that are being done in specific geographies. I mentioned the state of Colorado, the state of Michigan is another one. I know more specific local organizations doing work to try to connect the dots between the public workforce system and employers. And I am happy to try to talk to anybody about this afterwards about how to make that work.
Great, thank you so much. And so any resources, Katie, that you have, I'll send it out to the group. So we will get all that to the group. So I do have one question, Katie, and we'll close it out after this. So appreciate you all hanging out with us for an extra few minutes. So with NADA, we're doing our Business Services Academy that's going to be happening in August in Maryland. And if you're interested in that, you can definitely look on our website. But this is going to be specifically for business services teams and business services representatives. So all this great information that you've shared today, how would you suggest giving this information to a business? Right. So would you say, talk to them through the statistics or show them examples? But if I'm a business services representative and I want to take this information and translate it to them, what advice would you give me?
I would try to figure out why it's important to them first. So is it a business that's serving the multilingual workforce? Is it a business that is hiring immigrants and refugees? Is it a business that is looking to hire talent and running into issues with finding talented people? Because the information that we presented could be spun different ways depending upon what particular problem that business wants to solve. But the truth is that throughout the country, you're either hiring immigrants and refugees or you're serving them, because we are a country that is full of speakers of other languages. And if we think about how we serve and recruit multilingual workers deliberately, the information that I presented makes sense in one way or another.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much. This has been absolutely, absolutely amazing. So again, I will send any resources, any additional resources, you will have those by the end of the week. And I'll also include Katie's contact information in the email as well. So thank you all for joining us this month on our 30 minutes of excellence session. We do look forward to having you all again, and you can definitely stay in contact with us on all of our social media platforms to see what else we have coming up with NADA. So enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And Katie, thanks again.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.